You're listening to Weird and Dead, the paleontology podcast that tells evolution's most embarrassing and bizarre stories. I'm Meaghan Wetherell.
And I'm Amy Atwater, and we're two living scientists who are weirdly excited about dead things.
On this episode, we talk about how to get into paleontology, or more specifically, how the two of us did that.
We talk about our various career paths, and there are a lot of them. We also give tips on how to follow your dreams within the science that we love.
And of course, we talk about how the two of us met to begin with. This episode is not as gross as normal.
Yeah, we don't know how that happened either, but yeah, enjoy a nice PG-13 experience for a change.
Other than the cursing.
Meaghan, how the heck did you get into paleontology in the first place?
So when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a flight attendant. And that is because...
I don't know why I'm laughing.
Yeah, I would be the worst flight attendant of all time. And that is actually because I took an aptitude test in school that told me that I should be a cobbler. Ooh. Which is not a position that exists anymore, except for possibly for elves or people who live in... I don't know, Italy. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I like traveling. And then I went to outdoor school with the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. And I saw science and scientists, and I realized immediately in sixth grade that that is exactly what I wanted to do. So yeah, I started my paleo journey there. I wanted to be a geologist, herpetologist, paleontologist. And I think, technically speaking, I have done all three of those things. But it did take some time. I went to 1,000 colleges.
That's right. Didn't you? Yeah. By the time I met you, you were like, yes, that's right.
Yes.
How many undergrad institutions did you go to? Let's get them all.
I physically attended 3 undergraduate universities. And it's not like they kicked me out. I'm not like running from
No shame path. If they did.
I had undiagnosed ADHD.
It's true.
So... I first went to University of Lethbridge because I am Canadian and I didn't know what a Canadian winter was like. And by the time that I experienced one of those, I no longer wanted to engage in my heritage. So I moved back to Oregon and I went to Portland State University. Then I realized I wanted friends. So Portland State wasn't going to work out super well because it's a commuter college, or at least it was at that time. And nobody would talk to me. So then I went to Oregon State, and that's where I actually graduated from with a degree in biology. And the way that they do it at OSU is you have to take so many chemistry classes that it's just like one more class to get a minor in chemistry. So I also have a minor in chemistry. Yeah.
Ugh. I mean, good for you.
I worked as a chemistry tutor for a while there, which is weird to think about considering my complete inability to comprehend any of that now.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so a bachelor's degree in biology, then I went and did a whole bunch of other stuff and came back. By the time I came back, I decided that I did want to actually get my graduate degree in paleontology, which is not where we met, but it is where we started really hanging out, was when I was in graduate school. And so, I have a bachelor's degree in biology with a minor in chemistry from Oregon State. And then, like the traitor I am, I have a PhD from University of Oregon in geological sciences. Because if you're not from Oregon and you don't know anything about Oregon, those two schools are very competitive with one another.
And they're all of 45 minutes apart, too. So I remember having cousins. I grew up in Eugene, where the University of Oregon is, and I have cousins who live in Corvallis, or who did at the time. And anytime we had one of the, U of O versus OSU football games and they won, they would call us up like angry. Like, not angry because they won, but they were just like, in your face, suck it, like losers. And we were like, we don't even really care. Like, we're not really into this. Like, this is okay. Congratulations.
I would occasionally go to games during undergrad because my roommates were super into it. And then because the tutoring that I was doing was for the athletes, I was part of like the athlete tutoring program. So it was like going and watching my children play their little sports.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
Like, oh, buddy, you did it. Now you can do this
chemistry
too.
And they were like, no, I can't. Oh, that's so wild. I also was a tutor for student athletes at the University of Oregon.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How long was your you cannot sleep with the athletes training?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like by that point, I was off the market. And yes, I
Yeah.
do remember that. I also remember, I mean, again, this is at the University of Oregon, AKA the University of Nike. And so it was just a weird place to be no matter what. And I will tell you this, that the third floor of the building that we worked in was off limits to like normal people. It was only open to the student athletes and to those of us who were tutoring them. And in the third floor women's bathroom, there was a neon outline of Phil Knight's face in the women's bathroom. And I remember being like, why
Weird.
is there essentially an image of Phil Knight in this bathroom? Where, of course, because that building is all glass.
Right, that's
if you've ever-
that's the building
yes,
that drowns all the ducklings, right?
Yes. And we're the ducks. Like, this is bad.
Yeah, it kills
Yes,
the ducks.
it kills the ducks. It's a cube made of glass.
OSU does not have Phil Knight level of money, but they have like rabid level of enthusiasm. So very passionate. And our training to not fuck the athletes, which was the sole training we received, was about 3 hours, 3 straight hours of like, and here's how you do your paperwork. Don't fuck the athletes. And here's how you do this. Don't have sex with your students. And so that's my educational history. I did not sleep with any of the athletes. What is yours? How did you get into paleo, Amy?
Oh yeah. We just did a little hintsy hint here. Yeah, I mean, very similar. I mean, especially with outdoor school, aka for me, it was summer camps for definitely. I mean, prior to that, I was always really interested in biology, and by that, like when I was in elementary school, I just liked tigers. I loved tigers. I was just obsessed with tigers. Yes, tigers. I had so many books on tigers, and I'm pretty sure I went to one of those really sketchy like Tiger King level places in Southern Oregon where you could like look at the tigers. I never got to touch one. I was really obsessed with tigers, and then though I was like, well, they're dying, so that's not a really steady career option. And then I was like, well, what is science-y, but like there's always more to study. And I was like, the ocean, right? We've never seen all of the ocean. And by this time I was already going to these Oregon Museum of Science and Industry camps based out of Portland, OMSI. And I was like, okay, I want to be a marine biologist then. That obviously makes sense.
Oh yeah,
so
that's
I went to
so much more sustainable than tiger biology.
Well, but there's so much more to explore. It's like we know there's only like 20 tigers left, but at least we have no idea what's left of the ocean except for it's all ruined already. It's all wrecked. And so I went on 7th grade. I went on a spring break trip to Monterey Bay, California, and it rained the entire time, which was fine. We were very used to that as Oregonians. And we went snorkeling in Monterey Bay, and I could not do it. I was terrified of the kelp.
The kelp. I also really hate snorkeling because I went snorkeling with OMSI so many times, but my first experiences were always with salmon camp, which was the Native American camp, which is great. But
I was like,
always
was
wanted
it
to
full of
snorkel.
salmon?
We snorkeled with rotting dead salmon.
No.
Like it was like snorkeling with zombies. It was awful and it was so cold. And I was the counselor, so I had to like pretend to think this was cool, and it was not cool. It was gross. It was so gross.
See, that's a good reason to not like snorkeling. I was in one of the best places in the world to go snorkeling with support, and I was just a camper, and I was terrified. And it's not so much the kelp. The kelp, I am afraid of kelp. It's more of like what
Like
lies beneath,
okay.
what is hidden in the kelp. I get freaked out by big fish as we get into
Is
and the
that
sturgeon stuff.
Thalassophobia?
I don't know. I have
That's
it.
the name for it. Yeah,
I have
okay.
some fun ones, but I just remember sitting on the beach while everyone went snorkeling because I was just like, fuck this. No fucking way. So then I realized that I was like, oh, well, maybe if things are already dead, they'll be fun to study and they'll already be extinct. So I won't have to like have my heart broken like the tiger situation. And then I went on. So one of the camps that OMSI offers is PRT, which is the Paleontology Research Team. And it is like a 3-week long intensive paleontology paleontology team. And I had essentially done all the other camps offered because I am a privileged white girl. And so my parents sent me to them and it was great. So I was just like, well, what's another one I can do? And I just chose that one because I got to be in my favorite place, the John Day Fossil Beds out in Eastern Oregon for that whole time. And I just loved every second of it. And I knew that that was my jam. That was my thing. I was so dirty and like sleep deprived. And I think I had 3 showers in that 3 weeks, right? Like, you know how OMSI life was.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. And I know I came back from camp and I had really bad acne because I didn't bathe for 3 weeks. And my mother was horrified. And I was just like ecstatic and like glowing, except for my skin, which is not great.
Well, it's glowing. It's just glowing a different color. Kind of in a speckly sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So after that, I just got real into it and decided to go to college to pursue it and thought I was going to go to a bunch of different fancy ass schools. And then 2008, 2009 economic crisis happened, and it became very apparent that local was going to be a great option for me. And I'm very glad I did that. I already had some connections to the geology department there. And so I went to the University of Oregon, home of the Ducks. And I was in the honors college there. And I ended up getting a degree in geological sciences. And I did a minor in anthropology because I found out that anthropology offers a lot of the really fun evolution level classes. Ooh. Biology, a lot of times at some of these major universities is really focused on micro aspects of biology. And I'm more interested in organismal, like zoology kind of level questions. So anthropology was actually a really fun way to talk about like evolutionary processes and things like that on like a larger scale. So I highly recommend anthro classes for folks, and they're very interesting. So yeah, and let's see, my time there did some cool research too. And I think that that's what we were going to talk about now is some of our research interests. And I mean, and again, since we have this Oregon connection, some similar, or my first ever research project was on Oreodonts, Meaghan. Like, which is like, that's essentially what you did your dissertation on. Do you want to tell us about what the hell an Oreodont is and how you studied them?
Sure. So Oreodonts are the world's best animal. Well, they were anyways. They are very dead. And the way that I like to describe them to people is they're related to camels, but they are shaped like pigs. And some of them had claws and could climb trees. And some of them had hooves and bit each other in the face a lot. Mm-hmm. And some of them had trunks. Big old, not quite elephanty level, but like tapir level trunks. So doing all sorts of weird stuff. Most common organism in the North Americas for like 50 million years. Hypertrigulids might technically beat them, the little mouse deer, but like so common, so abundant. And then they all died. And so I really kind of wanted to know why, but I didn't get that far because it turns out that they have been so screwed up because there's so many of them. And a lot of early paleontologists didn't seem to like understand the scope of variation. So like new species of Oreodonts would be named off of things like the difference between my nose and your nose would make us different species.
There's a big difference. But we are both the same species.
We are both the same species. So I ended up spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to like kind of deal with some of the taxonomy problems in Oreodonts and how to like tackle those problems in other animals as well. So I did a lot of stuff on like species concept and statistics-y stuff, which is why I'm now a professor of data science because I studied so much statistics in order to understand Oreodonts. So that's a lot of the research that I've done. What did you do with Oreodonts? Cry? Oh, yeah. Like most people?
I quickly gave up. That's really what I did. I also love that I stopped. I also do have a master's degree. I kind of forgot to mention that part. That was my bad. I'll get to it with this part too. Yeah. But let's see. In my senior year of high school, I was a part of the International Baccalaureate program, which is like AP, but for nerdy kids who want to have a more international take on it. And we had to do a senior project, and I was already still in connection with my instructor from the paleo research team, who was our friend, David. And he was a student or a post-bac student, I think, at the time at the University of Oregon. And he decided to help me.
If you don't know what a post-bac is, I'm just going to stick it around for a little bit longer. I also did that.
Yes, nothing wrong with that. It's a great way to continue to get research opportunities and volunteer and education and just be a part of a dope lab group. Yeah. And so so he was like, oh, well, we could do something on oriodonts. So I looked at oriodonts and how we could use their teeth to understand if body sizes changed over the climate change. Because as you talked about, oriodonts were around for fucking ever, especially compared to modern species. Like, get your shit together.
Yeah.
Like, have some respect for these
Dear.
oriodonts. Yeah. Come on. So essentially they persisted in Oregon for so long. And also Oregon goes through substantial climate change during that time, from being like a hot, moist, jungly rainforest to drying out over time and becoming more seasonal. And if the oriodont body sizes would change in connection with that, and if there would be a signal in that. So I measured a ton of their first molars to try to, because molar size can be used as an inference for body size. There's some problems with that. Listen to our episode on biological constraints to hear about that. And then I tried to then correlate that with time and see if there's any major changes in body sizes. But as you said, we got fucked over because their taxonomy is such a hot mess that it was almost impossible to follow a lineage through time consistently and accurately enough to actually be able to infer if there was a change in body size, because people, depending on who they were and what they believed in, had different interpretations on who was related to who in the oriodont world. And therefore, like, it became quick. I remember sitting down and being like, okay, and then I'll see which species goes to the next species, or like, I'm going to go through this person's taxonomy and see how it connects to this. And I just had this like fucked up, horrible diagram of just lines to each other that I was just like, no, never again. Yeah. But I did great on that paper. I was awarded the best senior paper actually at my high school. So nice. Thank you, oriodonts. But yeah, it convinced me I did not want to work with oriodonts, and
not mammals. Mammals you stuck with.
Mammals are great. And I still love oriodonts. They're one of my first loves for sure. And that's why I was so glad when you were like, I like oriodonts. And I was like, here you go. I'm not that I gave you oriodonts, but I was just like, have fun. I'm so glad someone like you who is smarter than me will try to work on this and fix these things.
I'm not smarter than you, but thank you.
And I decided to actually pivot towards a combination of my loves, which is deep time mammals, but also anthropology, right? So I also was really interested in human evolution, but in undergraduate, I realized that human evolution is a toxic wasteland of personalities and drama. Yeah. And I realized that I wanted absolutely nothing to do with the shit show that was the competitive world of human evolution, where you fight over two tiny shitty fossils. And so I realized like, oh, you know what? No one fights over really old primate fossils. And I pivoted towards early primates. So like Eocene primates. So the Eocene was from like 56 to 34 million years ago. And it was when across the globe we saw, like thanks to the PETM, we saw a spike in temperatures, and it was like lush tropical forests, like even up to the poles. So primates just flourished.
Paleoeocene thermal maximum. It was like a super hot.
So hot. Thank you.
So hot. Yeah.
And it did primates good. They diversified really well in that time, and we see some really cool primate lineages. And that's what I ended up pursuing for graduate school. Is I had already worked on them a little bit in undergrad. I got a Goldwater research scholarship there, which is a great opportunity for undergrad research. And then I took a year off. So taking time off, we both took time off between degrees, which is a great option. Yes. I went to Denali National Park to study their dinosaur tracks, which was cool. And there was a government shutdown, so I used that time to apply for the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship on a project looking at Eocene primate diversity, specifically omomyids, and the need to do essentially an updated family tree phylogeny for them and try to understand what factors led to their extinction, possibly to use as a proxy to protect modern primate populations from extinction. If we can understand why primates went extinct in deep time, maybe we can apply some of that knowledge to conserve the primate species that we have facing extinction today. That's where I fell in love with primates and accepted what was supposed to be a PhD position at the at the University of Texas at Austin. I like to be very frank about this because I think it matters a lot. I did not complete my PhD. I dropped out after my master's degree was earned in process, largely because of my mental health and the program not being a good fit, and my advisor, while being a cool enough person, not being a great fit for my research and for my mental health. And I dropped out of that program to accept a job in Montana as the paleontology collections manager at a big old museum full of dinosaurs. So it is okay, y'all, to change the direction of your path. I thought I was going to be a PhD forever. I thought maybe I'd go back for a PhD. And now I'm like, nope.
You know what? You only changed your master's/graduate program once. It took me 3 separate times with undergrad. And also I had a community college credit on there. So like, at least you did like one big pivot, whereas I was like 4.
And that's the journey, right? And so when folks ask us, how do I become a paleontologist? I think we both can kind of chuckle because, I mean, it's really make your own adventure. There are so many different routes to go there. We both have a pet peeve on this. We're not going to go down into this rabbit hole right now about getting a degree in paleontology because it really doesn't fucking exist, guys. Like, we know that you got it in a paleontology track. Okay, we all did, but your degree says geology, your degree says biology, like your program, your department is this. I'm so sorry to hate on those people, but it's still like there are so many different ways. And when you hear someone be like, well, I got a paleontology degree, it's like, well, what is that? There are just so many ways to get a paleo degree.
I have a PhD in paleontology, but not really because my diploma says geological sciences, which we've kind of talked about that before on our blog and stuff. But when we talk about going to become a paleontologist, paleontology is so diverse and strange. You have to learn so many different things. You very rarely stick with one program anyways.
You know, it is great if you end up with a paleontology track or you're doing a paleontology focused degree. Sure, if you want to call it a degree in that, fine. But I think I guess I'm just picky about splitting hairs there because I'm like, that's not what your degree says. And I just think it can be a little bit gatekeepy for folks who don't have that at their local university to think, oh, I can't be a paleontologist because my school doesn't offer a paleontology degree. And it's like, I'm sorry, but out of all of the schools in North America known for paleontology, I'm going to say that Oregon is we've got a good program, but it's not necessarily where you're going to be like, and that's, it's not like some of these other programs. And yet you can still make it work because anyone can make it work at any level and at any university and at any community college for that matter too. So don't be intimidated by, oh, I heard that you have to get a degree in blah, blah, blah. No, you can I know folks who have degrees in, social studies or in literature and have gone on to graduate degrees in a more science focused thing and they make it work too. So many ways to become a paleontologist.
I do feel like you, out of the two of us, have had the most formal paleontology jobs. I mean, I've been, a professor, but I've never been like hired to do preparator stuff so maybe you should talk a little bit about all of your various paleontology jobs.
Oh my gosh. I think at this last job, I just got a new job and I think they looked at my resume and were like, oh shit, this girl never stays anywhere. And I'm like, it's true, but that's the millennial curse. It's not actually me. It's our generation. I mean, I think that it can be so gatekeepy to even what a paleontologist is. Like I see posts on social media all the time where it's like, you have to either be a preparator, a professor, a curator, or, those sorts of things. And I'm like, no, there's so many different ways to be a paleontologist, whether or not it's in your job title. So I think I've only actually had one position where paleontology was in my job title. And
interesting.
And that was when I was the paleontology collections manager and registrar for Museum of the Rockies at Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana. And that was an awesome job. I got to oversee the largest collection of Triceratops and T-Rex fossils in the entire world. I got to do some dope research. I was the only person there who gave a shit about mammals. So they were like, oh, this is yours. And I was like, I'll take it. I'm still working on that manuscript. One of them, whoops. It's going to take a while. And that was, okay, so if you want to pursue something like a museum and collection management, honestly, I already had a background of volunteering and working with the University of Oregon collections manager while I was in college, and it eventually turned into a very, very part-time paid position. So if you have any opportunities to volunteer, I know that volunteering is a total privilege, but it can really help with getting some of those experiences to understand how you manage fossils, which is honestly know how to document things properly, know how to handle things properly, and know how to communicate with folks who want to research these fossils. I think those are some of the most important aspects that you can work on. And it was a really fantastic job. I learned a ton. Bozeman got very expensive for us. My husband also finished his PhD right around the time of the pandemic, and it was a good opportunity for us to pursue his research and his job. And so we ended up moving to Georgia, of all places, which was weird. And I couldn't get a job at all in Georgia. There is paleontology in Georgia. There's some cool dinosaurs there, by the way. No one knows that, but there are. And so instead I took a museum technician position at the John Day Fossil Beds National Monument for 4 months, which again was, I was a preparator and a collections assistant. And so I got to prep fossils, which is a really cool opportunity.
That means cleaning.
Yeah. So using different equipment to remove the bones themselves from their earth grave.
It's just cleaning. It's cleaning and getting the bones out so that you can see them.
Yeah, preparator. It's preparing, I guess, is the long version of the word, but we all call it prep or prepping. You get to use like air scribes, and I mean, you use some of the most rudimentary equipment that people have been using for hundreds of years to clean fossils because it really hasn't changed that much.
Tools.
Yeah, dental tools. Yeah. Really, really cool job. I got to work on this jacket. So a jacket is when you use burlap that's been soaked in plaster to wrap it around like the bones, but also you don't want to just excavate just the bones when you're in the field, because then when you transport them back to the museum or university, like that can fuck them up. So you actually want to take a big chunk of the earth around them too, a lot of the rock around them too. And so you end up making these little mushroom toadstools, essentially, that you cover with plaster and burlap, and then you flip them and you plaster that part too, and then you somehow carry them out or use a helicopter if they're really big, and you have money. That's important. That's an important part.
Or a friend with a helicopter.
People can do a lot with just a flatbed truck, though. I've seen some impressive shit go down. So, and then you take that back, and then you have to open up and peel off all that plaster and burlap, and then remove all that earth and all that rock. And I worked on an Oreodont that had been collected. Your name was written on the Oreodont jacket because it had been collected the summer before I did PRT out at the Sorefoot site on BLM land.
I lost skin to that Oreodont.
Me too.
Because when we were going up to go collect it, I was swinging a cooler like a dipshit in one hand with someone else holding onto the other side, and I just ate shit on the trail up to Sorefoot.
It's a tough site.
And scraped off like, I want to say like 2 by 2 inches of my cheek.
No.
Which was just like pussy and bloody and gross for like 2 weeks. Looks fine now, but it was pretty nasty.
Damn.
So that Oreodont took
wow,
some blood.
I didn't know that part. Sorefoot was known to be a pretty gnarly site anyway. I'm not surprised that you tripped. It's like a good, if you're going to trip somewhere, it's going to be someplace like Sorefoot, which is really hard to.
Someplace literally called Sorefoot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting position. But now we both have jobs where, I mean, I still identify as a paleontologist. I recently left a position as a curator with the USGS, but I never felt like a geologist. I still feel kind of like an imposter because even though I have a geology degree, I only ever studied geology to understand the context of the bones. I never really and then I married one. It was a great way to get my MRS too, as they would call it, which is a really fucked up, nasty thing to say to women who happen to marry people in their field. Oh God, now I lost my train of thought. Yeah. Anyway, geology. I kind of identify as a geologist, kind of identified as a curator, but I still identify as a paleontologist, even though I haven't had a job where it's in my title for a really long time. So how do you grapple with all of those different things, and what's your current job?
Since getting my PhD, I worked as a data analyst sort of job for a little while. Then I've worked various forms of she's called an assistant professor, she's called a lecturer, she's called an instructor, like teaching style jobs. But like they don't have like an assistant
Mm.
professor of paleontology at most of these places. And because so much of the research I do is statistics based, I am now teaching in it's called the School of Information. We just became our own college and at the University of Arizona. And I teach data science classes and science communication classes and game design
That's
classes.
so cool.
It is cool, and it's a fun kind of new avenue too. I just got an SF grant with a coworker at Oregon State University, and a big part of my job on the grant is we got a bunch of money to make a video game all about the area that we've been working in, which is weirdly enough an archaeology site because I'm one of those paleontologists that works with archaeologists so much that I am muddying the waters between
Yes.
archaeology and paleo. But I do remember that when I accepted this position, there was a paleontologist who commented on my Facebook, "Oh, you're leaving paleontology." Like,
Yes.
no, man, I'm not. Just because my name doesn't have the word paleo and I'm not in a geology department, I'm just doing the math that you don't really seem to understand how to do. Even as a person with a PhD who is working as a professor, there are some people who think I'm not a real paleontologist because there's
Oh
so much
my God.
elitism with the weird term.
Yeah. I worked with a certain dinosaur paleontologist who I will not name because I fucking cannot stand him.
Yeah.
He thought that unless you had a PhD in paleontology, you couldn't call yourself a paleontologist.
Anyways, there's a little bit of elitism that comes in with paleontology jobs, but you know, we're both out there doing the research. We're both writing papers. But we're not just doing that shit. We talk to people, right? Like I think that paleontology has a huge, huge outreach component because it's one of the sciences that gets people really excited about
Yes.
science.
It's a
You know, like
gateway
it
science, as I
is.
like to
It's a
think of it,
gateway
you know?
drug.
It is. It is because even if you don't end up in paleo,
Mhm.
maybe you end up in one of the fields that is relevant, which is fucking every single field, by the way. It's so cool. It's so cool. You have to understand you get to understand so many
Yes.
different components to a good research project. By the way, before we totally transition to outreach, we've also done some cool research together.
That's true.
We have a paper together. We both have multiple publications. If you don't believe we know our shit, just look us up on Google Scholar. We're there. And we do have a paper together based on some cool work from West Texas as well. So if you're
beautiful.
interested in beautiful paleontology, cool Eocene sites, and how people date those sites, and we don't mean wine and dine at dinner, but understand how old they are, then you can look up. We'll have to put out a link to our, because it's open access because it's in Paleo Electronica, which we've both worked for.
Yes.
There's a lot, which does tie directly into outreach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really fun field to be able to talk to people about and do a bunch of different, like you say you teach classes on science communication. What the fuck does that even mean? Like science communication can be so vast, right?
Yes.
So what are some of the things you cover and how does that relate to your own experiences?
My science communication class, we really focus a lot on digital media. So we focus on things like how do you do science communication through social media? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? We talk about science communication in game design, and we actually design games together as part of the class. We talk a lot about myth busting, and we do, because we started that class during COVID, a lot of the myth busting has been around COVID, but we are kind of branching out now because everybody's tired of talking about COVID. So we're talking about like evolution myth busting and climate change, and there's a lot to talk about out there because science communicators also kind of get a little bit of disrespect on their name, considering that it's a very difficult field to do correctly, and there's a ton of research on how to do it that people just don't read. As it turns out.
And I think a big part of it is like a lot of things when done well. When it's done as well as a good science communicator does, it looks easy.
Yeah.
It looks fucking easy. It's like, oh, I could do that. And we do. Yeah, we see some of that where you're like, oh, well, what are you doing? That's not like science. It's not blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I think if you can't communicate your science to like a 5-year-old, then I don't know if you understand your science as well as you think you do. Yeah. It's not a bad thing to be able to talk to kids about and break down tough scientific concepts. That doesn't mean you're like telling any less accurate science. Yeah. It is actually a major skill set to be able to articulate that to a level to reach as many different people as possible. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've been told multiple times, not by my advisor, but by like other faculty members, that outreach is not going to help my career and I should maybe not focus quite so much on it. And it's the reason I got my current professorship.
It's why I got my current job too. I'm like, oh shit,
yeah. I'm in a department that very much values outreach and science communication. So that's been kind of nice. But yeah, so I've worked for PBS Eons as a scriptwriter for 5 years, something like that. And I'm writing for
your episodes are the best episodes. Can we just
you.
talk about how your episode is the one that got how many fucking
I think
gajillion views?
It has the most views of any PBS Digital Studios production. So any of their YouTube videos. Yeah. So I wrote one about Megalodon, and it's got like 24 million views or something. But my proudest accomplishment is a different one.
I love this. I think I know what it's going to be. I think I know what you're going to talk about.
I wrote one about rain and dinosaurs. And it trended very briefly for about 30 minutes above a Cardi B music video. And that is what I want to have written on my tombstone when I die. It's that for 30 minutes, I had something more popular than Cardi B.
And then I've seen you on camera as well.
Yes.
Surrounded by death, which is accurate for us.
Yeah. So after doing working for PBS Eons for a while, one of the scripts that I wrote was about ashfall fossil beds in Nebraska. And someone filming a documentary for National Geographic asked me to come out and like talk about that stuff out there, which was so fun and so cool. So I'm in a Nat Geo special very briefly because that like I was there filming for half a day, but they cut most of what I said because I realized I kind of came off as mildly psychotic.
Which should be the tagline of this podcast.
I didn't realize that like the vibe of the show was gonna be like, oh, volcanoes are so big and scary and they kill people and it's gonna kill us all. And I was like, isn't this awesome? Look at that dead baby. That is so fun. That baby has arthritis. Did you know that baby suffered for days before it died? God, science is so cool. Let me tell you about Marie's disease. We know this animal had a fever. So
this one puked here. This one puked there.
One of the lines that they did keep was something like, and I know that most people would think that this is sad, but as a paleontologist, this is just pretty cool. Like,
yeah, that sums up paleontology pretty well too. It's just you know, it could be anyway. Hire us, guys. We'll go on your documentary.
Just tell us what the vibe is, okay? I can play along. I can play along. I'm now writing for a different YouTube channel that's going to come out shortly called History of Humankind. And it's a totally different vibe from Eons, because Eons is kind of like, fossils are fun, a little bit of giggles, a little bit of jokes. Although I will say that the editorial staff takes out most of my jokes. And that always disappoints me. But with this other one, it's very dramatic. It's very serious. So it's been kind of fun writing for them. And it's just proof that I can do both. You just have to tell me that I have to be serious and not too excited about dead animals. You've also done a lot of outreach and you're very popular on Instagram. You should definitely tell us a little bit about that.
Oh my God, I'm Instagram, quote unquote, famous. And I'm like, no, I'm rapidly losing followers.
You losing followers still means that you have so many more followers than I do. So
I know, but the youth can get it so fast. And I'm like, how? And then I'm like, oh, Amy, you've been doing it for 10 years. It's okay. Calm down. Raise a baby. No, I like science communication for sure. Mm-hmm. I think when I started my graduate school program at UT Austin, I had access to all sorts of amazing fossils and casts and replicas and all sorts of, I was taking paleo related classes, primate anatomy classes. I was dissecting a primate, like a little monkey. It was super cool. Just lots of opportunities to show what my life day to day as someone pursuing paleontology, like what that really looked like, which resonated really well. And started to grow an audience there. Also, the beautiful thing about Austin, Texas is that you're just surrounded by the Cretaceous chalk, which is like 100 million year old limestone throughout the entire town and the entire state for that matter. And I, in my free time, would just go walk the dry creek beds and look for ammonites and other really cool fossils. And so those did really well on social media too, as they started to just feature more and more and more. All of a sudden my audience was growing and I recognized, I can use this as a platform platform to actually share information and kind of fight pseudoscience and hopefully create or lead to a more science-informed public, which will hopefully lead to smarter voters. Yay! Maybe we'll actually pay attention to things. And I also, and we're going to probably touch on this, I also wanted to highlight that women can be paleontologists. And I wanted to make it really clear that, you know, every single picture I took was, you knew that it was from a woman's point of view, and that was really important. And so that has grown into a good audience, which stems from our blog. So they have the same name of Mary Anning's Revenge. I've had some cool opportunities, not like yours with long-term stuff. I worked for Paleoelectronica for a while, which is the online open access paleontology journal, peer-reviewed journal. So I was their blog and public relations editor for like 5 or 6 years. And that was really cool. I know, it was a really long time. I like look at the dates and I was like, oh shit, it's like 2013 to like 2018 or something like that, 2019. And that was really cool because I took all these research projects, which Paleoelectronica is dope because it's just any type of fossil animal from any place in the fucking world, and we're going to share it. And so I had to work with researchers from around the world to write blog posts on their studies. I had to try to understand what a blastoid was. I had to try to understand what like skink surface traces of their body
and
movements was like.
We know that you don't fully understand lizards.
I don't. So it was really challenging for me on that one. I did things like put pictures with the tweets. They weren't doing that before I was there. And I was like, look, guys, we can use a picture on this tweet. Look, guys, we can use this thing called a hashtag. And they're like, whoa, wow. So that was really rad. And then, while I was at Museum of the Rockies, oh my God, they were like, what? You like talking to people? Here you go. So they put me on camera a lot. Like we had a C-SPAN tour at one point. We had a Facebook Live tour of the entire museum through Visit Montana, which is like the travel tourism bureau. And so I had to do a live tour of the entire paleo part of the museum, like without breaking, without totally fucking up and being like, fuck, God damn it. Like I had to just keep rolling with it. And I haven't watched it back because I tried. And I think I say awesome every other word. I'm like, here's Big Al, and it's pretty awesome. It has some injuries, which is pretty awesome that preserved these injuries. Here we have like a different Allosaurus. I know, but I'm just like, it's awesome. It's awesome. So I guess that's my like it's
catchphrase
too. Yeah.
Mine is I love dead babies, and yours is it's awesome.
It's awesome. So, though I will say that I think my proudest achievement in science communication to date, besides the Insta page, is that I did a comparison on Twitter when Twitter was cool of RuPaul's outfits compared to the dinosaurs of Drumheller, which if you don't know about those, go to our blog and see that. And I don't know if it was really trending or not, but it did well on Twitter. And it did well enough that I was hit up by multiple Canadian journalism and like news agencies that they're like, oh my God, you compared these dinosaurs in Canada to RuPaul. Tell us about it. And it was super funny. It's like, is it a slow news day in Canada? Like,
right? Yeah.
But that was that was really fun. I think we've danced around it a lot. So like, let's talk Mary Anning's Revenge. What is it?
Yeah.
How did it happen? When did we give birth?
So we keep saying our blog because we wrote a blog called Mary Anning's Revenge for like 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. We write there occasionally now, but not very often.
It's still alive.
It was kind of like our first joint foray into science communication, and it was we called it Mary Anning's Revenge because Mary Anning is the mother of paleontology, but she also was a woman in paleontology, and she did not get her due credit. And the two of us were both upset about it on her behalf, and also experiencing our first set of struggles as women in science. And so, we talk a lot about some of the stuff that we are going to talk about on this podcast, like just animals and things that really excite us and that we think are really interesting. And also a lot about like misogyny and racism and how it plays a role in science and won't let us get ahead. So we talked about that a lot on Mary Anning's Revenge. And that wasn't really where we met, but it was part of like what really kind of brought us together, I think, right? Like
But we started all of it because the stars aligned, and we were both at the University of Oregon for 1 year at the same time. I was finishing up my undergraduate degree, and it's when you had started your PhD.
And we were roommates.
We were roommates.
Not in the making out kind of way of roommates.
I tried.
I
tried because Meaghan's made out with my brother, so I thought that would be a way of like one person who's made out with both Atwaters, but she wouldn't do it.
I'd be too powerful. You can't. So I worked with Amy's brother at summer camp for like 5 years or something. And I was Amy's camp counselor for a little while as well.
Yeah, can I tell you the things that you taught me that I still think about that I know you taught me?
Yeah, you bet.
Well, first off, you taught me everything I know about all the constellations. So the story of Cassiopeia, Delphinius, the teapot, like all these motherfuckers are definitely because of you at Astro Camp. Astro Camp, which is what all the kids would go to and try to like make out with the other campers. And I was always like, does anyone want to make out with me? And they were all like, no. And I was like, oh. And so then I just listened to my instructor tell me about the stars. Well,
that's right. Yeah. And then when I was going back to graduate school, I was talking to Amy at a conference. And that's when we decided to be roommates.
You know what we did at that conference, right? It was in Vegas. And you and I wandered over to the porno convention. Like, wow, how did we not know that all of this was going to happen? We've just been, dirtbags. Yeah, and we couldn't get into the porno conference, but we were hoping we could like see a porn star or two.
When we say wandered over, we mean that at the same time as a big paleontology conference was being held, there was a porn conference, and it was like 2 floors over or something. Like it was not far.
And all we did is we walked around with the scale bars we had just gotten for free at our conference and took pictures of them next to the pictures of the porno conference and their fake appendages.
Yes.
So that you would have a sense of scale. And we thought we were so funny. We were so funny. We were funny.
That was so funny.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. This has been the last episode of our first season of Weird and Dead, but because of the amazing support that we've already received on Patreon, we do have enough money that we now can hire an editor, which is great because Katie can edit things for us, and instead of taking a year to produce a full season after a brief break, we should be able to offer episodes every other week. If you'd like to hear more in the meantime and help support the show and help our growth, you should follow us on Patreon for some exclusive bits. We also have bonus episodes that we have filmed in advance that will be going on to Patreon in the meantime. This podcast is part of the Geology Podcasting Network, produced by the traveling geologist Chris Spencer. Cover art was provided by Chris Spencer and the hosts. Our theme song is Unlock Me by Praz Canal. Editing services are now provided by the amazing Katie Bradley, and this episode was hosted and researched by us, Amy Atwater and Meaghan Weatherall. Although since I am filming this conclusion exclusively for the About Us, it would be really creepy if that was not true.